Will Cam Rising play against Oklahoma State? That's what we're going to be talking about, as well as the emergence of some of the skill position players on Utah's roster. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football and Locked On Big 12 have you covered. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by friend of the show, Ryan McDonald of the Deseret News. And Ryan, we get to start off with some good news right away. Cam Rising is more than likely going to play this Saturday, and I'm not just talking just to talk. I'm talking credible reports, not just from the likes of Brett McMurphy, who tweeted out that his report from last week he feels stronger about, but let's take it from someone who's actually inside the Utah building day in and day out. Dorian Singer said to the Utah media that Cam Rising is going to be ready to go this week. And even Brett McMurphy followed it up with, that was the report he had last week, was that Cam was out and that he would require stitchers, but he's going to be back and ready to go. That was reported last week. Even Josh Furlong, I thought, of KSL.com, did a great job of just saying, like, hey, Utah made Cam available this week to speak to. Cam was obviously speaking like he's going to play. They didn't do that last week. So all of the signs are adding up. We just heard it from one of the guys in the room. Ryan, Cam Rising's playing this weekend. I'm fired up.
All is well in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yes.
No, I mean, well,
it is.
First of all, as a reporter, I'm just beaming inside at the fact that a player divulged an injury status because of how cagey Kyle Whittingham is. Just drives me to no end. I get his point. Kyle Whittingham always says, I don't have to do it, so I'm not going to do it. And so, like, I get, in terms of releasing injury info, I get it, but I hate it. And so, therefore, I love it when a player just kind of innocently says what's going on. I love it. So I'm giddy. You're giddy for the fact that Cam is playing. I'm more giddy for the fact that we got the info from an unassuming player. Dorian Singer is my early season MVP. It's going to be really hard to knock him off of the top spot of team MVP after he did what he did today, giving that info. I love it.
I love it too. And we're going to talk about Singer later. Going to talk about Micah Bernard, the running back room. Skill position heavy episode is what we've seen from those groups after we talk about, of course, the news that Cam Rising is going to be available. And I totally agree. I've talked about so many times on my show. I wish there was an injury report in college football. And I'm also just shocked there isn't, just in the world of sports gambling and just the amount of money and investment that goes into college athletics, that we're still letting coaches kind of play coy like that. Is it an advantage? Sure. I mean, just the more game planning they would have done for Isaac Wilson. But at the end of the day, I just still think what this Utah team is going to try to do is going to be similar, right? It's going to be like, oh, hey, Cam Rising's not out there. Okay, let's just go to that other game plan where we pack the box and make the true freshman QB try to beat us. I just don't know, like, does it take a little more time? Sure, but I don't know, especially when the difference is Cam versus Isaac. When it was like Bryson Barnes versus Nate Johnson, that's such drastically different play styles. Then it's like, okay, I see the reason behind it. But I'm glad we just don't have to deal with that anymore. And once again, too, like, I felt like last week I had Porter Larson on this show. He said that he was told if it was a must-play game on Saturday, it wasn't against Logan, but if it was, that Cam would have played. The way Cam was warming up, the way Cam was acting, and I'll even add this. had no one kind of tipped us off like Singer did. The way Cam spoke in his own press conference led me to believe he's going to play. And I'm glad the stitches and everything have healed up pretty quick. Everything that was reported that this was going to be a quick recovery. And Ryan, I'm just glad that it is a quick recovery, because if Utah wants to go into Stillwater and win, they need Cam Rising.
Yeah. I mean, Dorian Singer aside, still love that he did it. But that aside, yes, for Utah football's sake, I'm glad that they have Cam Rising heading into this huge matchup against Oklahoma State. Not Zach Wilson. Sorry, you fans. Isaac Wilson. Yeah, he showed some stuff against Utah State. Yeah, he was solid. Utah State and Oklahoma State are different beats. Man, I just made fun of BYU fans and Utah State fans in the same sentence, basically. So yeah, Utah was not going to win this game on Saturday if Isaac Wilson was the starting quarterback. It was going to be a very uphill climb. So for Utah's sake, I'm glad that they have Cam back. You want teams to be at full strength when it's a heavyweight matchup like this is going to be. You want teams to be at full strength. So everyone's going to be at full strength as possible. Let's go. Let's have a battle. Let's have fun.
Let's go indeed. I can't wait for this matchup. And what does Cam being back actually mean for Utah? Well, you can even look back on what Kyle Whittingham talked about in his press conference earlier on Monday when he said Isaac is still growing and grasping the playbook. So Utah, just not as many things are available to them when Cam is in. This is not an easy offense to understand. Cam has been in it for, I mean, there's all kind of the jokes made about his age and everything, right? I actually saw something that him and Alan Bowman, their combined age is actually older than what the Colts-Bears game, Anthony Richardson versus Caleb Williams, is going to be on Saturday, which is just nuts to think about. But that means Cam does have a great understanding and command of the offense. So one of the things that Kyle mentioned is Isaac Wilson doesn't quite understand the checks at the line of scrimmage to get them into the proper just running technique, like where they want to run the ball at, the checks and the adjustments they want to make. He's just hasn't even been at this campus for a full year yet. So his knowledge versus Cam's drastically different. That wealth of knowledge that Cam will bring, that big game experience. Cam has played in hostile environments before. He's gone up and had to take on a team like Oregon, right? He's played in Pac-12 championships, which have been obviously incredibly hostile too. Some big games against USC. We know how well he's fared in those two. So Cam has been in these big games. He's been in these big moments. He's comfortable in the offense. Now, on tomorrow's show, we'll have to dive a lot in more into how comfortable will he be because of his lack of playing time. That's something we'll touch on more. But as you said, Ryan, Utah is clearly better with Cam Rising under center. And this game is going to be incredibly exciting to watch because of Cam being back. And I think Utah has a great chance to go into Stillwater and get a win.
Yeah, I mean, as good a chances as they were going to have, and I think is the match. Is Kansas State on Utah's schedule? No.
They're not. They're not. It goes this is, and even next week's game against Arizona. I don't know how good Arizona is. I want to go in and deep dive them, but I watched almost every play of that Kansas State game, and I was not impressed with Arizona. And that goes back to even that loss against Northern Arizona, like them barely squeaking out a win over Northern Arizona. This is by far the toughest game on Utah's schedule, and it's not even close right now.
Yeah. So, obviously Utah has the aspirations that it does in terms of college football playoff. Nobody is shying away from we want to get to the college football playoff. And obviously you don't need to be as near perfect now as maybe you did before. It got expanded, but you still want to be as good as you can. You still want a great record. And I think part of it too is you want to show, like we said, if this is Utah's most difficult game by far, I think part of Utah wants to show, hey, we're not just advancing because we have an easier schedule. Like, we want to beat good teams, and I think there's a pride in that. And if Oklahoma State's the best team on Utah's schedule this season, I'm sure Utah wants to say, yeah, we beat Oklahoma State. They're a really good team, and we beat them, so we deserve, whatever Utah will have coming for them.
Yeah,
All the good.
Yeah, if you beat a team like top 15 win on the road, that would that would do wonder for this Utah team. They would, in my opinion, vault into the top 10 of the rankings. I guess they're at 12 right now, so maybe they wouldn't, but some of those rankings are going to take care of themselves. I have massive questions about Oregon based on what they've shown, and a couple of these other teams as well still have to kind of play their toughest tests. Utah's is going to come up on Saturday with everything in front of them, and players are going to play a massive role in this game are those in the running back room, as well as the wide receiver room. Want to talk about what we've seen out of those two groups that had a lot of question marks, the running back room, and a lot of hype, the wide receiver room. We are going to be diving into that in one moment. But first, I want to take an opportunity to tell all of you about an exciting opportunity and one of the sponsors of our episode of Locked On Utes today. Hey, Locked On Utes fans, have you heard about ROY? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. ROY changes the NIL game for fans. Once again, ROY allows you to directly back your favorite college athletes. With ROY, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan support. If not, the money is returned to the fans, so you know you're getting a good deal on your investment. You can download ROY for iOS or Android and enter the code Locked On, and that is a space actually. Normally we give this promo code, it's all together. This has a space, so it's the word locked space and then on in all caps. So locked space on, and you'll automatically enter into a sweepstake to win $5,000 cash. You can visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. You can get the Roy app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use the referral code Locked On for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. You can visit joinroy.com for more details. Get off the sideline and into the NIL game with ROY. Support the players, change the game with ROY. All right, Ryan, let's talk about the Utah running back room, as it was a area all off season. We heard Kyle Whittingham and Utah in general talk about, like, we don't know who running back one is going to be. There's a lot of things that are up in the air, and all of that has yet to get settled out in the off season. Well, through 3 games into the season, Kyle Whittingham said Micah Bernard is on his way to being RB1. And I'm going to say something that I think everyone who's watched this Utah team already knows. I think Kyle Whittingham already knows. Micah Bernard is clearly this team's best running back. He is RB1. No, he's not Zach Moss. And as Kyle said, you are not going to give Micah Bernard 30 carries a game. That's not what he does. But you know what he does? Make big plays in the pass game and in the running game as well. I love Utah getting the ball in screens and open spaces. And I love the way that every game where so many running backs, because you give him 30 carries and maybe like they wore down over the course of the game, he has some of his best runs in the fourth quarter. I think that's an awesome thing for this team to lean on. Talked about this Utah team's experience with Cam Rising also applies to Micah Bernard. Heck, I used to have a class with Micah Bernard. I've been graduated for 2 years now. So Micah has got the experience. He's showing it off. His strength, his vision have all improved, I feel like. He's clearly this team's best running back. He is going to be RB1 for them, just not maybe the traditional sense that we think of it for a Utah bell cow back. But I really like the role that Micah has settled into on this team.
Yeah. I think you said it all right there. I think because he hasn't been RB1 before, I think there was question of, can he be RB, the bell cow type. And I think Kyle Whittingham was uncertain of that. Can Micah Bernard handle the carries, handle the workload, because he hasn't done it before. And so I guess it comes down to definition, what your definition is of RB1. He isn't the bell cow. He's not your Zach Moss. type running back, but he is Utah's best running back. And so in that sense, he is RB1, and even beyond that, I think he has shown the ability to be effective. I think it's one thing to say, all right, this guy is going to get the load of the care, the large majority. Couldn't think of the word majority for a second. The large majority of the carries, but is he going to be effective, or are we just giving him the ball just because we got to give somebody the ball? But no, Micah has played really well so far, and so yeah, I think there's no question that he deserves, I think, to be known as RB1. However someone might define RB1, I think he's earned that right to be called that for sure.
I think he has, and his play will reflect that for the rest of the season with the amount of snaps he receives. Back-to-back games over 150 yards for him, over 274 yards. And also, this is the one thing I got to give him credit to. He's averaging 6.7 yards a carry. I did not realize it was that high, because it's always that difference of like, hey, he had a 2-yard run here, and then boom, he broke off that big run. It's always interesting to see where that average settles. That's obviously going to come down as the competition ramps up, but an encouraging sign for Micah. Micah is
a running back.
Yeah.
Isn't that Micah?
Yes, we can firmly say that now.
if I was Micah Bernard, I would just be yelling that now all day, every day. I'm a running back.
I hope he gets to, hey, I want to hear him yelling that against OSU. I think that would be fantastic. I mean, he technically played, can we call, is Ohio State called OSU as well? Like the team you're doing against? I know, do they still get called that?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Obviously, Oregon State's also OSU. So you guys can let us know in the comments what the actual one is after you look it up. We'll look it up after this show. But rather than waste time talking about the Ohio State, let's talk about who RB2 ended up being for Utah. Not Jaylon Glover. More on him in a moment. Interesting quote there. Mike Mitchell has emerged as running back 2. And Ryan, I've been really encouraged by what I've seen from Mike Mitchell, because while Micah has done a good job still running the ball between the tackles, he's been effective. Micah is still best when he can get to the edges on the outside. So he is more of that just quicker receiving type of back, even though he is still the best running back over on Utah's roster. So when you have that quicker back, what complements him well? A sledgehammer. That's what Mike Mitchell is. This guy gets after it. He is a load to try to bring down. 26 carries for him, 116 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. Already got his way into the end zone once too, and it's just incredibly tough once again to tackle. Between the tackles, always shakes at least a defender or two. Now, he does have an injury, so he's been hampered by that a little bit, but in the limited role that Utah is using him, especially to spell Micah, who does everything at a high level for this Utah team, what Utah wants Mitchell to do, run between the tackles a few times each game. I really like him in this role. I've been incredibly impressed with the former 4-star who was one of the breakout stars of spring ball. Nice to see him now reaping the benefits with on-field production in 2024.
Yeah. It's interesting when Kyle Whittingham decides to be honest in press conferences, and I think he does it often with kind of the second string type guys. And where I'm going with this is in fall camp, people, and it's not just Kyle but other coaches too, they talked about Mike Mitchell as being a guy who was turning heads and was playing really well, and lo and behold, here we are. Mike Mitchell, what, 3 games in? Are we 3 games in? Is playing really well. Yeah, is playing really well. And so I think there were signs, that he was going to be an important part of the offense, and so far he's showing that to be. I do think it'll be interesting to see how his role. Yeah, I'll say it this way. It'll be interesting to see how that 1-2 punch of Micah Bernard and Mike Mitchell plays out during the rest of the season. I guess I'll go out on a limb and say, it's a kind of minor prediction, I guess. It's not too out there, but
Not too steamy. Okay.
not too steamy, I don't think. But it wouldn't totally surprise me if it maybe gets a little closer to 50-50 in terms of
See that.
Micah Bernard and Mike Mitchell as the season goes on. Not quite sure how close to 50-50, but it wouldn't totally surprise me if Mike Mitchell starts, really making a dent in terms of the workload with carries and so forth. So that's my really unexciting prediction. Extremely lukewarm prediction.
You know what the prediction I'm nervous about is he's going to be this year's Jaquindon Jackson, where he just can't get healthy because he plays such a physical position that every week he's running around out there just banging in between the defensive linemen and linebackers that he won't be able to get to full health. But if he is able to, whether that's over the bye week, you missing a game, whatever it may be, if this is what he looks like dealing with an injury, healthy Mike Mitchell should absolutely be 50-50 with Micah Bernard to me. So I totally agree with you. I'm just curious to see if he can get healthy. Now, what's been interesting is Jaylon Glover, who once again we thought would be RB2, he's not RB2, not even RB3 right now. Not really sure where he is on the depth chart. If you look back at Kyle Whittingham saying he wasn't really in the game plan right now. And we even got to hear from his coach, who had a very interesting quote. Coach Ganther had a very interesting quote that I want to discuss about the running back room. And we still got to touch on the wide receivers in one moment. But first, want to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook today. And I don't know if you guys have been keeping an eye on it, but the Oklahoma State line has been shifting. Originally, Cowboys favored by 2.5. Just already today, Utah now favored by 1.5. So, however you guys are leading on this game or all of the other great games across the country for college football, how about you sign up for FanDuel, you get that Sunday ticket deal. NFL action, MLB playoffs are right around the corner. FanDuel is the place to be. So make sure you guys head over to America's #1 sportsbook today by visiting FanDuel.com. All right, Ryan. We're going to talk about the receivers in a moment. Really quick, the Jaylon Glover situation. His position coach, once again, Quinton Gather, said on Jaylon, he's in a tough spot right now. I mean, he's a guy that's been playing here since he was a true freshman. Now his reps have kind of been cut down, and he has to continue to work, continue to be humble, and show that we don't need to keep him off the field. Thanks to Josh Furlong of KSL.com for posting that. And this is a situation where Dejon Stanley was the breakout star of the first game for Utah. When you have a player emerge at a position like that, someone is going to lose snaps. Glover got a few carries in game 1, hasn't gotten any of the last 2 games. This is just a tough spot right now for Glover. This is where we'll see Mike. We mentioned Mike Mitchell. If he can get fully healthy and back into it, or if he ends up missing time, that's where Glover might pop back up. But this is where I really like Jaylon Glover, the person. He's been incredibly loyal to Utah. I hope he finds his way back on the field. When he's been on the field, he's been a pretty good player for Utah. What we love about Utah, and the reason that Utah has been so good for years, and that they've beaten out the schools like USC and Oregon and some of those other ones, they don't promise you playing time. The best players play. Utah, from what I've seen, is playing their best 3 backs right now. I hope Jaylon's able to factor back into the fold because loved rooting for him, enjoyed the moments. But I have zero issue right now with Jaylon Glover not getting snaps with the way Micah, Mike Mitchell, and Dejon Stanley have been producing.
Yeah. I'll call this. Yeah, I'll say this is my opinion. Well, yeah, because it is my opinion. I think in a sense, Jaylon Glover had some stuff kind of working against him a little bit coming into college. From Florida, so you're gonna have the Zach Moss comparison.
Yep, that's true.
Same build as Zach Moss. Kind of the short, stocky. What is he? 5'7", 5'8", maybe 5'9" in high heels.
And you're not wrong. These comparisons were absolutely made. I remember because he was from Florida, there were people saying, I think even on my own show sometimes, like he was going to be the next Zach Moss.
Yeah. And so, whereas Mike Mitchell, Dejon Stanley, I don't think had those kind of comparisons coming in. I don't remember them anyway, but I do remember
Stars versus a 3-star, but you're right. It felt like it was different with some of the stuff around Jaylon. I do agree with you.
Yeah. And so from that standpoint, I think it might have been a little bit unfair for Jaylon Glover because he came in immediately and there were all these expectations of being the next Zach Moss, and not very many people can be the next Zach Moss, and so I think a little bit, it was a little bit unfair to him, and it just has turned out that Dejon Stanley and Mike Mitchell have supplanted him, and maybe the expectations for Jaylon Glover should have been a little bit more modest. If he was from Missouri, would we have had the same expectations of him? Oh, but no, he's from Florida.
Yeah.
And Zach Moss was from Florida, so he's going to be the next Zach Moss. Yeah.
You make a very interesting comparison because you know who else was from Florida as you were talking? I was reminded. Mike Mitchell. But there's a key difference between the narrative and what was going on at the time. If you look back to 2022, which is his freshman year, who was the lead back on that Utah team? It's Tavion Thomas. And you mentioned him being through a lot. Obviously, everything that happened with Tavion Thomas in 2022. But we all knew Tavion Thomas was a temporary running back for this team. And Jaylon was already a guy who we heard was going to be factoring in. It was Tavion, Micah Bernard, and then Jaylon Glover. He was RB3 as a freshman, didn't get snaps against Florida, but shortly after got snaps. So he was hyped up as producing right away. So if you're already producing right away, you're only going to grow and get better. Then you're going to continue to produce. What happened though? Jaquindon Jackson moved to running back. And then a lot of the excitement for Jaylon, he was RB3 again in 2023. And then what happened by the time he got to 24, those young running backs who I think when we're talking about why there wasn't as much excitement with them was they weren't hyped up as coming in and producing right away because who do we just talk about? Jaquindon Jackson, Micah Bernard, and Jaylon Glover were all already in place. So when Jaylon first got in, he was already expected to contribute as a freshman, even did a little bit. We expected to see more. The only one who barely did anything last year is I think Dejon Stanley made a couple of just like big splash plays. So we're like, oh, maybe he'll do something. But that's where Mike Mitchell was able to sneak up a little bit more on spring ball because it's all like, oh, yeah, we forgot about him because there wasn't that same hype surrounding him. So that's the situation where we're with Jaylon. Hope the best for him, and it'll be interesting to see how the fall plays out for him. One thing that I think we're both really excited about, Ryan, is that we did see Dorian Singer have his best game yet as a Utah pass catcher. This receiver room is not as loaded as the tight end room, but I still like what Micah Pittman, I think, can provide. I expect him and Cam Rising to start building on their rapport once he comes back. Loving how Andy Ludwig is using them money parks right now. And Dorian Singer is the best all-around receiver on this team. He can win at every level of the field, particularly downfield. Love that Isaac Wilson found him downfield a number of times. Him and Cam were just fingertips away from connecting on that 50-yard bomb back in the Baylor game too. I think Singer is only going to continue to ascend with this Utah team, and I loved seeing him putting in that work against Utah State.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the pedigree. We remember what he did in that season with Arizona before he transferred to USC. You never know what's going to happen when someone goes to USC. You never know how that whole deal is going to go. And so he regressed a little bit, but yeah, he showed at Arizona that he's an elite talent. And so coming into Utah, I think there was all the expectation in the world that he was going to be WR1. That doesn't ring off the off the tongue.
I like the effort, but it doesn't. You're not right.
RB1, QB1. Yeah. So yeah, Dorian Singer has all the talent in the world. I'm just looking up Utah's receiving stats right now. Here we go.
Well, I'm a good host, so I actually have you beat for those.
Yo,
This Utah team through receiving yards. It's actually funny that Singer is fourth, 109, right? John Stanley is still number one. Money Parks with 33 yards, but it is interesting. But I still expect by the time the season is over, I expect Singer to finish two, only behind Brant Keithy. Would you feel the same, or you think Money's going to finish ahead of him?
looking at it right now, no. In terms of yards, Keithy will probably finish number one. Yeah, I think Singer is going to finish number two. Yeah, because it's between those four. Yeah. Stanley, Keithy, Parks, and Singer. I think there's every reason to believe that, assuming health for everybody, and of course that's what we want. I think Singer will finish number two, and maybe even number one if he has a bunch of deep balls. Because Keithy will, kind of take the shorter, catches maybe a little bit less downfield. But no, Dorian Singer, I think it's only a matter of time before he really gets going, really gets cooking, and shows the type of player that he was at Arizona that one season.
The fact that DeJohn Stanley is in the conversation, like one of the top four guys you mentioned, and by the way, I agree. Like, unless Micah Pittman really goes off, I expect Stanley to have a really good chance just to be one of these top guys because he's genuinely just that hard to contain out of the backfield. His speed on those wheel routes, you see linebackers struggle to get over in time to be able to cover him. So it's just such a credit to Stanley, his speed, growth and development as a player. And this Utah team's got a lot of weapons on the outside. We didn't even touch on the loaded tight end room, but Oklahoma State is worried about him. And speaking of Oklahoma State, on tomorrow's show, going to be breaking down this Cowboys team, what I think that they will be trying to do to stop Utah, what I think Utah will try to do to take advantage of them. It's going to be a fun show. But Ryan, if people want more Utah football or just more sports in the meantime, where should they head over to?
Deseret.com, DESERET.com. Joe Coles, my colleague, does a great job covering Utah football, and we got other people covering a whole bunch of other stuff. So head on over there.
Ryan, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Great as always.
Always a blast. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. As I mentioned, Oklahoma State will be breaking down the Cowboys tomorrow. Utah is heading for their first Big 12 clash. We got lots of coverage, wall to wall, coming your way on Locked On Utes.